So I am Debbie Singheiser, and I am the Director of Board Services at VSBA. So this is our agenda, and this is what our time together is going to look like for the next hour. Communications, as we know, is a huge topic. We couldn't possibly cover it all today. So what we'd like to do is to respond to your needs and to hear what you want to know. So to this end, each of us will briefly present on our respective roles in communications, leaving plenty of time at the end for your questions. So to get us started, I just want to provide a little bit of context of where communications belongs in school governance, why it's such an important part of our job as school board members. So we as board members, we are lucky. We already have a captive audience, people who are naturally interested in and often personally vested in as parents and grandparents and caregivers, even as citizens, who are personally vested in what's going on inside our schools. They want to know how public education is going in their district. While at the same time, as trustees of our schools, we as board members have fiduciary responsibilities, one of which is to ensure that our taxpayers are getting a good return on their investments in public education and that their taxes are being directed to programs that will meet the district's needs or the needs of our students. So engage the community and create a vision is the first of 6 pillars of school board work in Vermont. It is described in the book, Essential Work of Vermont School Boards, that all board members and superintendents receive a copy of. The board is in its strongest position whenever it is engaged with its community. For instance, the board should create lots of opportunities to engage with the community to define and refine the vision for the school district. And once that vision is in place, the board then is responsible for monitoring progress and making policy and budgetary decisions to help achieve that vision. To keep the community engaged in the district's ongoing work, both the successes and the failures, the board proactively seeks opportunities to interact with its community on a regular basis. One of the times community engagement happens every year is during budget season, which we are currently in right now. Boards present the budget for the following fiscal year. So this year we're preparing and presenting our budgets for fiscal year 25. And this budget presentation can be done in a myriad of ways. One way is at the annual district meeting with the registered voters. This event will be happening around the state in the next couple of months, depending on when your school budget vote happens. Many, but not all, happen on town meeting day, which this year is Tuesday, March 5th. So presenting the board-approved budget at the annual district meeting with voters is an important part of community engagement, for sure. However, community engagement really should be happening 12 months out of the year, not only when we are asking our voters to pass a budget. Why? Well, because frequent communication builds community trust and confidence in the board, and in turn, strengthens support for our public schools. Also, using regular communication practices in good times will help to serve school leaders during the more challenging times. So again, the board is in its strongest position whenever it is engaged with its community. So that is just a very high-level overview of the role of the school board in community engagement. So now I'd like to hear from others who do this work every single day. We are so fortunate to have with us today a panel that has rich and deep experience with communicating their district's priority needs, which they are willing to share with us. In addition, they will be taking your questions at the end. Also, some of our panelists have provided us with written materials from their district, which we did send out in an email to those of you who had registered this morning. And if you registered after we sent out that email, don't worry. These handouts will be posted on our website when we put the recording up, which usually happens in a couple days. So now, let me introduce you to our panelists in the order that they will be appearing. Lisa Cacciatore is the Communications and Marketing Direct Coordinator, a staff member at the Slate Valley Unified Union School District. She is joined by Tim Smith, a member of the Slate Valley Unified Union School District, Dave Connery, who is a member of the Champlain Valley School District, and Jim Salzgiver, a member of the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union and also a VSBA board member. Thank you all very much for joining us today and being willing to be part of our panel. So please, as a reminder, as Carrie said, if viewers have a question, to remember to use the Q&A box. And if you'd like to direct your question to one of our panelists specifically, please just put that person's name with your question. So with that, I'm going to ask Lisa to get us started. She is our communications expert who works as the communications and marketing coordinator for Slate Valley. And Lisa, I'll have you start us off, and I will share my screen and show your slides.
All right, thank you. Okay, so you gave me the introduction, so you can skip this one. I just put in here what my main objective is as the communications and marketing coordinator. You know, I think it's probably very typical for all those who fill this role in the different districts, so we could probably skip through that pretty quickly. So I wanted to start off by, you know, again, all of our districts, we have the same mission to pass this budget, but obviously, even though we're all in the state of Vermont, our districts can look very different, whether it's the size of the population, where it's located, you know, basically who we are serving. So I just had put this together for our superintendent this year. It gives a very quick overview of our district. It's a very small district with 5 buildings, and you can see our student demographics is primarily white. So I just want to throw that up. So for those who are looking and watching, how we handle and present our information to our community might be very different than what you would be doing, because again, you really do need to know your audience, and this is all based on, you know, who we're presenting to. So you can go to the next slide. As stated, my job is all year long, obviously. This is one of the busiest times when we're trying to get some information out on the budget, which particularly this year seems pretty confusing. But the other 9 months of the year, it is crucial to have constant communication with your community in whatever means possible. So I just threw up some basic things that we do in Slate Valley. I try at least once a month. I would love to do it every week, but I just physically can't. Do a daily post, you know, a Monday, Trivia Tuesday, Where Are They Wednesday, you know, something that goes out on social media and it's also up on our website. Again, just to connect our community. You know, the posts highlight our faculty, our staff. It also shows what alumni are doing on Wednesdays. Fun little facts are put out, and I try to go around and take a lot of photos of what may be the focus, like I'll pick art for a week or something like that. Again, just to show our community what their tax dollars are paying for and what our students are doing. For the school board, our coffees and conversations have been really good. We may not have a really high attendance, but it is an opportunity for school board members with administration to be out and to be available for the community to come and have a cup of coffee on us. So we move around to our different towns. We schedule different dates. And the one I put up, you can see it was early September that we did it. So it was before budget was even being discussed. It was just kind of a, let's, you want to talk about the beginning of the school year, any concerns. Community members can bring, whatever questions they have. It's just a less formal venue to be able to sit down and casually talk to, as I said, school board members and your superintendent. Our superintendent usually comes, most of the time comes, and then we have other admin. We also started a podcast. This is very new to us, but our superintendent, again, just to get some basic information out, we put out 4 of them. And we purposely did that because we were hoping to get a little bit of an audience and kind of generate some basic conversation and insights of what's going on in our district. And then, of course, our next ones will be specifically about the budget. You can go to the next slide. Again, this is just more, I won't explain them all, but again, constant social media posts, Facebook, Instagram. Don't do much on Twitter. We don't have much of a following, but I would say Facebook for our demographics seems Facebook and newspapers. You can go to the next slide. Tends to be where we get most of our get our information out, and we do seem to get a response. It's very important, and I learned this very quick, to know all the reporters that report on your schools and have a great just dialogue with them, almost at least on the weekly, kind of can tell them things that are going on, because they will be knocking on our door when things are not great. And it's nice to be able to put things out to show the good things, the wonderful things that also are happening. So these are just some examples of the papers in our area, showing just basic good things that are happening in Slate Valley. Nothing to do with the budget at this point, but this is what we do year round. So you can go to the next slide. And again, that communication to show how the community is partnering with our district. That's a main goal of our district, is to have our kids involved in community and try to bring community members into our schools too. So whether it's through, the Rotary, we have a lot of high school students doing work-based study in the community with certain businesses. And then we try to get out and do community service too. So those are just some of the highlights. And again, as they happen, I'm there and I try to take the pictures and get a press release out and put it out on social media. Next slide. And obviously the website, that's a constant trying to keep that updated. But I just wanted to highlight how all of our board meetings, year round, and board information is updated on a page right on our website. So hopefully people who are interested other than budget are comfortable, and they go and they might, attend the school board meetings or watch the recordings afterwards. And so then again, when the vote comes up, it's hopefully we have a bit of an audience that will know where to come to get their information. So next slide. And branding, I just had to throw this one in here because again, we have a certain color palette, we have certain fonts, we definitely have a branding, which I don't think this is unique. I'm sure all districts do. But, if you are pushing that out with that same look all year long, then again, when you're trying to push especially budget information out, hopefully just as they're flipping through, because you have like 1/10 of a second as they're turning a newspaper or whatever, if they see those colors and see those graphics, that they know, oh, this is something from the school. So I just threw up some of the basic images and things that I've done through the year with that constant branding. And I think this is the next one's last slide. And then this is actually the budget. So, with all that was previous is what I do the other, 9 months. And then when it's budget time, these are the things we push out. We do have budget forums, so we have our coffees and conversations in the morning. We are going to have another round coming up in February to try to get that morning audience. But next week we have some budget forums starting that I put some PR, actually these were mailed out. So every single voter in our district received one of these in the mail just to come and, again, time to sit down, ask questions about the budget. There'll be a presentation, so hopefully voters are well informed when they go to place their vote. Last year, this was very successful for us. We made sure people knew how to register to vote and really just kind of pushed, because obviously you can't tell people to vote for your budget, but to just encourage them to go to the polls. And we have parent pickup and drop off in the mornings and the afternoon. And we had people at each school, teachers and staff members, that would hand these out. And they were like little reminders to vote. And on voting day, we did the same. So, and then there's some infographics, our local paper. We did pay to have, it's this quick little information, bulletin information in a sense about our budget, things that we thought that we hear people were concerned about, tried to make it a little simpler and get clarified information out. We did a Google ad, which we will be doing again. We only did it for a month, but it was pretty successful last year. And we have, and again, I understand, and I know everybody's probably doing very similar things, but this traditionally, we also put out a mailer, which will be coming up. And the taxpayers, they get probably 2 weeks or so before they actually vote, that breaks down the main points of the budget and what they're looking at to vote on. That's in the bottom right corner. And then I also have a page that's allocated strictly for our website. And even if you went to our website now, I have an alert banner there that says to stay informed, and you can just click right away and go to the budget page to get up-to-date information. So that's what we do. I'm going to stop there because I might have gone over my 10 minutes. And if there's any questions, then obviously I'm here to answer them.
Lisa, we do have one question for you.
Yes.
How many individuals do you tend to have attend the budget forums? Do you know what percentage of your voters attend?
Oh, it's a small percentage. I would say we typically get, our highest numbers been maybe 10 to 12 people, and we do it at each town. So I would say that's only about maybe 2%. But this year we're trying something different, where we're going to have a forum that's 100% virtual. So we will not have people actually attending, but we're hoping that maybe that'll draw some other people in that might not want to go out at night, if that's the reason that, or if they just find it easier to come at night. So that'll be something new that we're doing this year.
Great.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have right now.
Thanks, Lisa, so much. I think we'll stick in Slate Valley and move over to Tim, who, as I said, is a member of that board. So Tim, go ahead.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you, Lisa. We're very fortunate to have you working for us in Slate Valley. You do an incredible job of getting the good news out, and that's a key point. Is we always want to focus on, our students and what they're doing and what the good news is coming out of our district, because certainly there's the potential for a lot of negativity. Passing a school budget can be very messy. And I guess what I want to focus on now is kind of the strategy that our school board uses to kind of reach our voters and get the messaging out and get people to the polls to support our school budget. So, I've been a school board member for 12 plus years. I've been a board chair the last 4. And again, there's no one size fits all for passing a school budget. The thoughts that I'm going to share with you right now are just from my experiences and tips, but certainly every community is unique. And that's really the first point is just getting to know your community. Western Rutland County is typically quite conservative in nature compared to the rest of the state. And, unfortunately, we've had some failed budgets over the past few years. And because of that, we typically take a very guarded approach to the decisions we make when crafting our budget. It's really important to know your demographics in your community. Is your community consisting of, baby boomers, people who are on fixed income, who are really concerned about the bottom line and what they're paying in tax rates? Does your community have a lot of young families or young professionals coming into the community who are starting families and who are going to have children attending our schools? And ultimately, who shows up to vote? My experience, it seems that when people typically are concerned only about the bottom dollar, when they might not have kids in the school system anymore, or they have a complaint, those are the people who typically come out with more energy to vote. And our job as a school board is to make sure those people, typically parents who've got more vested, are the ones that are actually getting out to the polls and voting. And as Lisa mentioned, we've got various methods that we try to target those parents with. We've relied upon our staff and utilizing the NEA to help get our messaging out. School assemblies, information that goes home with children to their families to try to get that population of voters out to the polls. I just know from experience in our district, things like infrastructure and after-school care is generally widely supported by our community. What's not generally supported, or what's a more difficult sell, is when you're adding staff, when it's not supported by student enrollment, when you're adding additional administration to kind of oversee the bureaucracy of public education now. And that's an important point too, because schools simply aren't just teaching reading and writing and arithmetic anymore. They're doing so many things and providing so many social services that was not the case, 5, 10, 20 years ago. We're providing healthcare, we're providing meals, we're managing state-placed in the homeless population, counseling and traumas, etc. So our older generation, schools look completely different now, and it's always a challenge to communicate to them how different schools are now, what schools are responsible to provide, what services schools are responsible to provide, and how that's impacting our budgets. That's an extremely difficult conversation to have. Just in terms of strategy, I think it's best that all school board members, whether you've been on the board 12 years like me or you're brand new, you make best efforts to educate yourself on school finance matters, current legislative activity, and other relevant issues. If you're unsure of what an answer is, it's best not to give incorrect information to someone out in the public. Simply just pause and refer that individual to another board member who might have more experience, or to an administrator within the school system. Generally our spokespeople are more senior board members, or people who are, the chairman, or people who chair various committees. Some other points that I would mention, focus on controllables, what a school board can control or not control. And unfortunately, we can't control a lot of drivers of our school budget anymore. We negotiate our teacher salaries with the NEA. They're a very powerful lobbying body. Health insurance costs are up 16.4%. Those are negotiated at the state level. Insurance and utility costs are up. Those are things that are largely outside of school board control. And it's just good to communicate that to your voters. Things that we typically do have control over still are staffing levels, that adding additional programming, in various maintenance and IT investments. So as Lisa mentioned, always focus on the student success stories. People want to hear that sort of good news. Don't focus necessarily on testing scores, because they're always changing, and you really have to sometimes question the integrity of that data. Just keep in touch with your students as they graduate. Maintain those connections with your alumni, because they can be important messengers for you to help get the word out about the good work that your school is doing. And one of the debates we're having now as a school board is, how much do we get into the details of the complexities of school finance? historically we do drill down and communicate to our voters what the impact on their tax rate, on the homestead tax rate will be. But this year has so many challenges with that, with Act 127 and the waiting and the various spending guardrails. So strategy wise, does it make sense to get into those details? Because you have the potential of scaring people off. Certainly you want to be transparent, but again, it's really hard to communicate this complex information in an easily digestible manner. So, I think we're maybe thinking about shying away a little bit from trying to give a really accurate prediction of what the tax rate might be, or trying to explain the yield, because that's always changing and it's not going to become finalized until May. So it's really each board's strategy, how you want to, the details that you want to get into. Is your electorate willing to absorb that kind of information, or would they rather just hear about the good things that are happening in your school? Just quickly here, just a few other tips. Make yourself available to the municipal select boards. It's always good to offer to go in front of those boards and give them a courtesy overview of your school budget, because they're important messengers within your community. And just make yourself available, right? As Lisa mentioned, we have board meetings in all of our schools. We have various events where we welcome people into our schools, or we go out to them in the community with the coffee and conversations. We go to the diners, we go to the general stores. We just try to invite those people into the community and be a part of those discussions. And then lastly, there's always rebel rousers, right? There's always those people within the community who like to drum up controversy and cast school districts in a negative light. We've taken really a proactive approach to that, and just reached out to those individuals, picked up the phone and called them, knocked on their door, tried to have conversations with them to make sure that they have accurate information, listen to their concerns, and just, try to bridge those divides. So it's really an all hands on deck approach. And I hope that certainly with Lisa's help, that we're going to have a successful budget season this March. Thank you.
Thanks,
Tim, we have a question for you.
Sure.
A board member says they have a divided board and have members actively working against passing their budget. Any suggestions for countering those messages?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I've been fortunate that typically our boards are in alignment. I think you always have to remember the role of the school board too. It's very limited in scope. We basically develop and pass a school budget, and then we hire and evaluate a superintendent. So it's really outside, in my opinion at least, the responsibilities of the school board member to go out there and to cast negative press on the collective work of that board. You shouldn't be bringing your personal agenda into the school board setting. You should really be focusing on what's best for the kids and how to best utilize the resources of your community. So I guess just my advice would be to have conversations with this individual or this group of individuals on the school board and try to find common ground.
Good advice. Like that. Thank you, Tim, so much for your presentation. I'm going to
Sure.
move up to the northern part of the state here to Champlain Valley and have Dave Connery speak to us for a few minutes about how they communicate with their community.
Yeah, I think that's the first time CVSD has been called Northern, but I appreciate hearing these presentations from Tim and from Lisa. I feel like a lot of good topics have been raised and things that we also do here at CVSD. One of the things that we find really valuable is that we have a communication schedule about the budget that takes town meeting day and works a schedule all the way back, and we start talking to the community in September and October. It was especially important this year with Act 127 changing so many things with our budgets that we started talking to the community and to faculty and staff in October in small groups to explain like some of the pressures that were on the budget, so that before we started truly developing the details of it, we could lay out challenging issues there. And those were face-to-face meetings around, as well as we had we did have a budget forum early in the process that was in one location. It was at Champlain Valley High School, and then we also allowed that to be virtual. And we've gone through many versions of how to have um, budget forums, and we've really tried to, it's difficult to get people to come to budget forums. It's and relative to the size of your school. We've tried to go to each individual school, and then we've settled on one for the entire district because no matter how hard we try, we can't get enough participation. One of the things that is good is that we allow people to do it remotely so that we can have one forum and people don't necessarily have to commit to, as Lisa said, get in the car, go out at night and go to a school and take time away from their evening in order to do that. So that's helpful, but really the face-to-face forums are always challenging. You need to do them, but they're poorly attended. And in this case, you just have to continue to get credit for making that effort, because if you don't make the effort, that's when you have problems. As far as communication to the community, in that schedule that we do, it's very easy to communicate to the families of kids that are in your school. Our superintendent sends out a monthly update, and that refers people to a web page, and there's a bunch of topics on there, and we can have links to budget information on that. The school board doesn't specifically send notes to each individual parent. I think sometimes that feels a little odd, but just that we have a lot of information on the website and a centralized location so that people can look at what the board is doing, as well as like a separate section that's dedicated to the budget. But we realized when we consolidated that, even in Shelburne, we have 700 kids in our K-8 school. We have 5 to 7 times that number of people in town who don't have kids in the school. So they're not connected. And so you have to connect with these people that don't have the easy access to communication because they get a newsletter home every day, and they don't know exactly what is going on in school to the detail that a parent does. So we have to reach out to those folks. We do go to town meeting, and we also meet with try to go to each select board and hold a meeting. I know after consolidation, there were some towns that were like, why are you here? And we're like, well, because we want to keep talking to the individual towns. And I would really push back against your select board that says, I don't think there's a reason for the school to be here presenting. And I was like, well, I think it is. So I would always encourage folks to do that. We go to local associations, like one of the ones that comes to mind is like the Rotary holds a meeting once a month. We go and talk to those folks. And I think that's definitely a demographic that you want to get into, because it's in our town. I don't want to make generalizations, but like the demographic of our Rotary is completely different than the demographic of our PTO. So you want to make sure you get other people involved in the budget conversation. Also, getting back to something Lisa hinted at, communication year round, as far as using social media and using different platforms, I think, is vital, so that when budget season comes, people know where to go for information and they have a favorite way to do it. It's easy to get people to go to your own Facebook page who are in school, but another highly effective way to reach folks, I think, is on Front Porch Forum, because you can get a conversation. Unfortunately, it gets a little out of hand sometimes, but at least you can understand like what people are, what are they most concerned about? What are the things that are coming up? And, I think the many years that I've been on the board, exactly when the situation is bad based on the number of things that are going on in Front Porch Forum. So it's unfortunate that you have that and you have to see it, but it's also a good gauge, like, oh, we got to pay attention here. I wanted to make sure I gave folks enough time to answer questions. I hope I covered enough. There was a lot of information in previous to that, like does that talked a lot about what we do, but going out and using platforms to reach folks that don't have kids in the district that we find is very valuable.
Dave, I
leave
have
it
a
at
few
that.
questions for you.
Okay.
And others can answer them as well if they'd like. The first one is, I feel like this year we have much greater challenges than normal in terms of how much the state funding changes what we're presenting to our community, and particularly that our expectations about what the tax rate impacts would be. At the same time, sounding defensive about our increases are coming from is a bad strategy. So do you have any thoughts on how to address the huge number of changes in this year particularly?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. Um, it's difficult, and what we've played around with graphics to try and explain how we anticipate the tax rate to be impacted. It's difficult also to point out, like with the 5% threshold, it'll only go up this much. And yes, you can see that we're spending more than this, but you're only going to be charged this. And that's a very touchy thing we've decided because the money comes from somewhere. And it's, you know, saying that you're going to use one-time funds above the 5% threshold to cover certain things is sort of a double-edged sword. It can be difficult. I think um it's it's so I'm at a loss as actually to really explain in detail how, like, why is we have these numbers, we can look at what last year's budget was, what last year's budget is calculated to be based on the new law, and then how it affects this year's law, and walk them through that process and say this is how we landed here, and and just be like, your message is loud and clear to us, but there's also another avenue, which would be your representatives to the House and Senate. That would be very helpful to talk to them. I know there's some folks that are, yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. Does anybody
Would
have
anyone
any?
else Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, we have another question. How do you communicate with the older community members that don't engage electronically so much?
Yeah, we do put a flyer in the paper a couple of weeks beforehand. Um, we do, we do have proactive articles that are in local papers to a point. And then also, like I mentioned, going to local organizations that have a demographic. Here in Shelburne, we go to Wake Robin, we go to the Rotary, and then in the past, we've gone to local restaurants and just set up a table with a placard like a science fair, and done that. I think the philosophy has to be, I'm not going to get them all, but if I get some and they can be advocates for me to 5 of their friends, that's really what you should be gearing towards.
Anyone else? Okay. What does your presence at town meeting look like?
Yeah, so for us, we have a member, we cover 5 towns, and we have a member from each town go to select board, go to the town meeting, and present a common deck that we all have, somewhat tailored, like a minimum of it is tailored to each individual town. But most of it, because it's a unified school district, or, because it's a school district now, it is a wider picture and then tailored to each one. We used to flip a coin, see who went first, but now that we're a school district, our select board is like, we go first. You guys are an ancillary presentation. You can go second. So I would say that it's the interesting observation there is that since we have unified, a lot of people leave after the town presentation, which is unfortunate, which I don't really understand. We get fewer questions. We always track the number of questions about buses versus the number of questions about math. It's usually 5-1, buses to math, so which is always kind of funny. But that's what our town meeting likes. Like, I'm curious what Tim, what your town meetings look like, or
Um, well, sometimes there's a conflict. We have six towns within our
Yeah.
district. I personally, along with one of the other representatives from Castleton, does go before the town meeting in Castleton. It's really their meeting and their business. So typically we have to ask for the time to have that space to get our message out. And in the last few years, with all these complex issues, they've been generous to give us that time and space to communicate and explain to the public what they're going to be seeing on the ballot tomorrow. So we're appreciative of that. We don't have a canned slide deck. Myself and my other board member, Julie, we just kind of answer questions and just try to use simple language to make best efforts so that they can understand the forces that are ultimately driving the education spending and the increase in their tax rates. The property values and the CLA, the General Assembly and the decisions that they make, and just kind of appeal to them on a personal level. I've got a lot of trust in the community. I think people generally trust what I have to say, and if I can just get that, impress upon them that I'm doing my best to put kids first and to be good stewards of your resources, I'm hoping I'm making an impact.
Great. Jim, last but certainly not least, from Bennington Rutland, wondering what you can add to this, or have we said
Yeah.
it all?
Well, I've said a lot. So I'll kind of try to, move through things a little quickly. The BRSU, we're just 3 school districts, but communications is sort of a tough issue for us. We serve 2,200 kids, but they're spread across 12 different towns, located in 4 different counties and 3 different tech center regions. Our total footprint is about 460 square miles. So we cover a lot of territory, which makes communications really tough. So that's school board and community communications is sort of an everyday topic for our board. We realize that we're always looking to improve things. We've developed a system that we think works pretty well, but we're never sitting on our hands on that. We're continually trying to figure out ways to improve upon that. Sort of consistent with Slate Valley, we do have a professional communication consultant that works with us. And that really came about when we had our big community engagement process with our Act 46 merger. We decided we needed to bring somebody in. That was, our lesson learned from that is that was a smart thing to do. The communication consultant continues to be a part of our team till today. And like others have said, our communication effort is definitely a year-round effort. We really want to make sure that we're keeping schools, our schools on the minds of our communities all year long. We also want to make sure that our local media people have our schools on their mind all year long. So we share, like Lisa was showing, try to share interesting things that are happening in our schools, stories about kids, things that'll connect with a community. We try to make sure that we have plenty of those. Our communications consultant really, ends up writing articles for our local newspapers, roughly once a month. And, we think that those are the good stories that have been talked about, before. Tim brought up, sharing some, positive things is really helpful. Our board and our superintendent, we, try to do some general communications, but we tend to communicate a little bit more when there are actual issues, important issues that could affect our schools. That tends to come from the board and the superintendent. A lot of that tends to be legislative related. Then of course there's the budget. Now, but the content, what we find is we focus on using local newspapers and our local public access television to kind of generate content So that's newspaper articles, op-eds, letters to the editor, press releases, and public access TV, and public PSAs and things like that. And then we take that content and we deliver it in just kind of every way we can possibly imagine, which is certainly through the newspaper, school websites, school newsletters, cable TV, which ties into YouTube, social media, and community forums. So with this, with the budget process, as has been said before, we try to keep people aware of the schools, but then the budget process, our intro to that this year was a story in the newspaper, essentially outlining what our goals were for the upcoming budget, and that came out in November. So that gave a sense for, what are we trying to accomplish with the budget before we even had started to build it fully. And we also gave the whole community a listing of all the meetings, over the course of the budget process that were going to be held, where they were, and things like that. We also use social media before every budget meeting, to try to make sure that we were, informing people, developing any interest we could get, and then ensuring that after each of those meetings, there was a newspaper article written to give some sense of where we were in the process. Now, as has been said before, to be honest, all that effort, we didn't get a lot of people coming to our budget meetings, just like everybody else. It's not the favorite sort of thing, but I think that they, being televised and being covered in the newspapers, that gets the word out. We do find that a number of people watch, and I'm sure it's the same in other districts, do actually watch the meetings, or pick and choose from the meetings afterwards, since they're recorded. But one of the things, I think one of the things that our district has done very well, and I'd kind of recommend for any other district, is we've used our annual report. We hold separate annual meeting for our school, again, 12 towns and all. So we hold a separate annual meeting for all of our townspeople, that's remote and in person. But a key thing is we produce an annual report that we found we put a lot of effort into it early on. It has a ton of information. It's included with your package is a copy of our annual report. And we certainly welcome anybody to steal anything from our annual report that might be useful to use, with their towns as well, because it includes a lot of discussion of things like CLA, how the tax rate is determined. It has a section on frequently asked questions. So we try to make sure, essentially that's a tool that, right now you have in your package, you have last year's annual report package. This year we're working on the new one, and there are new challenges to include in this year's annual report because of the pupil weighting, etc., all the changes. But one of the real benefits of having that one written document is we can, it's tough for individual board members to be able to answer all the questions. You can actually refer people to that document, and you could refer them to other people who would know the answers. But it's helpful to be able to refer them back to that document, even saying, hey, look at section whatever, look at page whatever, if you're interested in an answer on a question. It also saves school board members from having to know everything in the annual report if it's tough to answer some questions. So it's our one place to go. So that I think having a written document that the community can go to get their answers is one of our best tips.
Great. I have some questions for you, Jim. Are you ready?
Sure.
How do
And
you
others
share
join in.
complex? Oh, how do you share complex information and connect with people who individually start voting early before the formal information session on town meeting day?
Well, that again is the reason for the town report, because the town report gets out well in advance of it has to get out way in advance. That's going out with our warning and all as well. So that has to be out there early. It provides people with, from our perspective, we typically, send out like note cards saying, pick up your annual report at your town hall or whatever. And, we try to push people, towards that. So I think, that document, which, it's our little town report, which we'll never focus in. But it is our way of trying to get out to the community early with a source for most of their answers to most of their questions.
Anyone else want to answer? Okay. How much do you budget? So this may not be specifically for you, Jim, but maybe for others also. How much do you budget for a communication/branding consultant?
That's actually a good question. I'm not sure what our specific number is. We've, Slate Valley, you guys, have in-house folks. We probably have, we budget less than a person.
Yeah, at Champlain Valley, we have a half 0.5 FTE as a onboard communication specialist.
And I'm at Slate Valley, I'm full-time, 1 FTE, it's just me.
Awesome. All right. How are you all handling the issues of the CLA? We're limited to 5% pre-CLA. Our CLA is 72%. Our tax increase is adjusted to 17.8%. This doesn't seem possible to pass, yet we can't cut enough to make any difference.
Yeah, it's going to be a very difficult. I think there's some discussion now happening at the statewide level. When we had the stories on how our budgets came out, we were pretty responsible with our spending. And actually, one of my concerns was the stories came out and talked about how much our tax rate was increasing, and then said, gee, and our CLA is going to impact us big as well. And I'm not sure the community's focused on that enough yet. As we have, our per pupil spending is up. Again, 3 districts, we have 1 district up 2.6%, the others up less than 1% each. And overall, our increases are in the territory of 18% tax rates. It's that I imagine that the statewide press is also going to be picking up on that as the budget season continues.
Okay,
Yeah, the
I have one more
CLA
question. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the CLA is certainly a complicated situation. I guess a couple ways to spin this potentially bad news, but yeah, I think people, generally speaking, someone's home is their largest investment. So a positive might be with these decreases in CLA, your home investment has appreciated quite significantly in value. That's not a bad thing. I mean, if you have if 3 years ago you had a CLA of 1 in a home worth $100,000 and now your CLA is 0.7, your home is now valued at just over $140,000. That's a 40% increase in value. So it's almost like paying your taxes, right? If you don't have enough withholdings taken out during the year, you've got to pay a balance due when you reconcile your tax return. So you could argue that we've not been paying enough over the past few years, and now it's just catching up to us. And also remember too that I think at least in our area, Rutland County, I mean, 2/3 of the taxpayers are income sensitized to a degree. So it's just 1/3 that's paying the full price value on the assessed value of their home. So that's always something that we try to reinforce in our messaging as well.
Yeah, that's a huge point, and that you'll see in our annual report. We try to get people, we try to inform people that they should be aware of the income sensitivity. If they haven't, aren't taking advantage of it, they probably better, because it's that is a huge factor in that a heck of a lot of people shouldn't bear the whole brunt of the increase. But I think, this year is a very challenging year because, as it's been said before, we've got the change in the pupil weightings through Act 127. And then we've got the CLA. Both of them are having a rather significant impact CLA is having a big impact everywhere. 127, it's, it helps some, hurts some, it's all over the place. But it makes
Okay.
it a lot more complicated.
And that leads into this question, which you kind of may have already answered. Any suggestions on how to present the change in chart of accounts? For example, the chart of accounts, a tax formula, it makes the year-to-year comparisons very difficult, except the bottom line.
They're really thinking about the change in the pupil count calculation specifically to long-term weighted ADM. I'm guessing, which, the taxpayers are going to see a recalculation of last year versus the calculation of this year on the same basis. So that should, help them be able to, wrap their arms around the change. What isn't, there's also a page, I believe, that's going to be provided everywhere that's a calculation of this year's, long-term weighted ADM with the different weighting factors. And that could introduce people and, to the idea, but it's very hard to, most community members thought that things were way too complicated before, and now they're more complicated. It's a real challenge.
Okay, I have a question for all of you. What is a piece of advice you would give to board members who are watching, something that will help ensure their annual district meeting and budget presentations go well?
I'll go first and just say it's kind of what Tim alluded to in his presentation, which is understand the details of the information you're presenting and give honest answers. And if you're unsure of something and confused, ask some more questions and try to anticipate the opposite side of each issue that you're presenting and how the public may see it differently, being outside the technical preparation of the budget, looking in from the outside. I was going to give an example, but I think that's what I would try to anticipate, the opposite side of every pro that you have, and prepare an answer honestly, and just, if you think you're spinning something, take a step back and be honest.
Good advice.
Anyone
I'll
else?
I'll add something if that's okay. One thing that I did mention, of course, we want to get our whole community, the people who are not, don't necessarily have kids in the school system, but we did find out that a lot of people, not last year, but the previous years, the actual school committee and teachers, because we employ a lot of people like within our district, were not taking the time to go to vote. They almost were like, we're assuming it was going to. So that was a real push for us, was, yes, sometimes I think we need to acknowledge the people who don't have students in our school system, but don't overlook, like, you have a group of people who are invested right now. And sometimes we just assume that they are going to vote, and they're not. So we really did do a push. And I think that helped us quite a bit last year. I mean, from our actual faculty and staff, but also, again, those parents dropping their kids off and bringing them in. So that was, I'd like to think that might have helped a little bit, that push last year.
Thanks, Lisa. We are over 1 o'clock, and in respect of people's times, especially those on the panel, I just wanted to wrap this up and say thank you, a huge thank you to Tim, Jim, Lisa, and Dave for your time and participation, sharing your expertise and advice and tips on how we're going to communicate during this difficult budget season. I think is invaluable. I wish you all the best of luck during the rest of the budget season, and beyond, of course. Just as a side note, VSBA will be hosting its next webinar on February 12th. And the topic of this one is going to be very interesting and relevant to all of us on this call. It's the Legislative Advocacy Lunchtime webinar. So we'll be hearing from VSBA staff as well as a number of legislators about how the first few weeks of the session has gone, what we can anticipate for the remainder of the session, and also ways that school board members can get involved. So please do join us. That's on February 12th. It's a Monday at lunchtime. We also wanted to remind you to please take 2 minutes to do the survey when you get off this call. It pops up right away. So just take a couple minutes to do that. We do read every single evaluation, and your feedback really does help us improve our webinars in the future. As we navigate the coming weeks with our annual district meetings and budget votes, please let us know, meaning the VSBA, how we can help you. I was going to show you another slide with my contact information, but for the sake of time, I won't pop it up. But do reach out to our office if you need any help or support. That's what we're here for, is to serve all of you. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. And again, to our panelists, thank you for your time and sharing your expertise. And we look forward to seeing everyone next time. So have a great afternoon.